we are looking at Juror Number 2. The release of this was weird because it got a tiniest of theatrical releases back in November, I think, and then it got dropped on Max. For whatever reason, it took us all a while to get to it. Todd got to it right away. I just got to it. Zach just got to it. So we're going to talk about it now because it's a Clint Eastwood movie. And I mean, he's still cranking these things out at 93. So, I mean, that's worth something right there. But let's talk about it. I'm going to start on this one. Juror Number 2. It is directed by Clint Eastwood, written by Jonathan Abrams, and it stars Nicholas Hoult, Toni Collette, J.K. Simmons, Kiefer Sutherland, Zoey Deutch, among others. And I feel like this is a movie where the premise is just so good that it can carry a movie if it's done well. And the premise is Nicholas Hoult is called into jury duty, and he starts to hear the case that he becomes a juror for, and starts to think, oh man, I think I may have committed this crime. A man is accused of murdering his girlfriend, and he thinks he may have accidentally hit her and thought it was a deer. And as the plot goes on, he's realizing he can't really come forward and confess. He's got to kind of go along with this and steer the jury in not only the right way, but potentially in the way that's going to be most beneficial for him at the same time. And those aren't necessarily always the same direction. Toni Collette plays the prosecutor, and Chris Messina, that's one I didn't mention. He plays the public defender who's defending the guy who did this, allegedly did this. J.K. Simmons is another juror. Kiefer Sutherland is a lawyer friend of his that he seeks some legal advice from. This movie is gripping. It had me the whole way. And so for that, that's awesome. However, part of what had me gripped is how ridiculous it is at times and how it just doesn't work in certain places. Like it's obviously taking a lot from 12 Angry Men, right? Where you've got this jury that's deliberating, what are we going to do with this case? And it feels open and shut, but there's people who are trying to sway the jury in the other direction. And there's a lot of 12 Angry Men there. The problem is that it's like, oh, this is an open and shut case. And you're looking at the case, you're going, there's no way this is an open and shut case. Like every bit of evidence here is so circumstantial. And I couldn't buy the case. I think they could have sold the case a little better and made this work a little better. And for that, I was struggling to really connect with parts of it, even though the intrigue of the situation had me gripped, but I didn't know what to do with the fact that I'm like, you stumbled on building a good case to bring this premise around to. So I'm at 3 stars, a high 3 stars. I kind of want to go 3.5, but I'm going to stick at 3 just simply because there's too many holes in the subplot inside of the plot, even though like the main part of the plot is like really, really fun. Nicholas Hoult, man, awesome. Once again, I love J.K. Simmons in this too. I thought he was awesome, but yeah, 3 stars for me. Todd, you saw this a while ago.
Yeah. A couple weeks ago.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not a typical Clint Eastwood movie because it is kind of messy and he doesn't normally do that. But well, what you're saying is the case is a little iffy, and the case is iffy because the DA needs it to be open and shut because she's going for re-election, and the guy who's being charged with the crime is also a bad dude. So it's like, and people wanted it to be open and shut, and people wanted it to be over. So, and then that's why it kind of is like streamlined, and that's why he's getting railroaded. And they even kind of talk about that. But I think it's a really cool story. It reminded me of this miniseries I watched a while back called 7 Seconds, just like in a tight 2-hour format and a different perspective. But like, I just don't know how we've never seen a juror who thinks he may be the one responsible for the crime before. Like, how has it never been made into a movie? I think the movie, it goes in ways I wasn't really expecting. There are some pretty cool twists along the way. There are some ridiculous things. Like, I don't think that the jury is allowed to go like inspect the the crime scene, like that. Almost positive that's not allowed, at least not in this state. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel like Clint. There's no scenes where like people are like throwing all their feelings at the wall. Nothing could have really been trimmed, and nothing's really internalized. It just is like a really solid courtroom drama thriller, and it's not begging for Oscars or anything like that. And I kind of like that. I mean, and Nicholas Hoult is awesome in this, and so is Toni Collette, and like especially Nicholas Hoult, he's like this tortured character who's in a really tough spot, and you really don't even know what to think of him or the situation he's in. But it's a good movie. Yeah, shame on the studio for screwing it up though, because this would have been a great conversation starter at the theater. But it plays fine on Max, and I was definitely at 3 stars as well.
Yeah, it also doesn't look like a Clint Eastwood movie. Like there's none of the color saturation or desaturation that he normally does to his movies. So it doesn't look like one. It doesn't feel like one. It's kind of interesting.
It feels like you could have more Eastwood movies after this. Like, it doesn't feel like something at the end of someone's filmography, but I'm pretty sure this is probably his last movie.
Now, I will say, probably knowing that Warner Brothers and Max are behind this movie and how they botched the release, my guess is the only reason this movie even saw the light of day is because it's Clint Eastwood. With the way they've been shelving projects that are fully completed and like, this isn't going to make any money. We just won't release it and take the tax write-off. I bet you that's what would happen with this, except it's Clint Eastwood, and you can't do that to Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
So, all right, Zach, what'd you think?
Well, this is a very difficult movie to review because it's a classic case of, do you review the 2 hours that you spend watching the movie, or do you incorporate the extra textual, events that have happened, which you guys have touched on? I mean, for one thing, you are talking about a 94-year-old filmmaker, which we don't see every day. And so it's remarkable that he was even able to put together a coherent film. We have Francis Ford Coppola, who was at least 10 years younger than that. And that, to me, was an example of a deranged film. But then you also
that is a
have
wild
this
statement you just said, that he's 10 years older than Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah. You have the element of Warner Brothers in this movie selling this movie off. And I think there has been a natural tendency of film critics to maybe overrate or overpraise the movie almost as a defense or defiance of the corporate maneuvering. As if to say, how could a soulless corporation know what audiences are going to like? And you got the Batgirl movie and the Acme movie, that both of which have been shelved by Warner Brothers because the CEO thinks that audiences aren't going to notice and that they can get a quick tax write-off on it. So there's a bit of that. And then I think the third thing, which I think you guys kind of alluded to a little bit, this is such a throwback movie. I mean, this feels like a John Grisham novel from the 90s. It feels like Tom Cruise should have starred in it, and maybe Susan Sarandon should have played the DA or something like that. And there's a lot of juiciness to that. And we on this podcast are old enough to remember when those movies came out, and we're old enough to appreciate. Well, Todd didn't appreciate the firm, but we're all old enough generally to appreciate those movies for what they were. I'm going to come out and say this is Clint's best movie since $1 Million Baby. If this is his last movie, this is a fantastic way to end his career. I was gripped by basically every second of this movie. I thought, now, am I guilty of overrating it? Possibly, but let me at least explain why I like it so much. First of all, as Todd was saying, very cool look at what it's like to be a juror. Okay, first 25 minutes of this movie show the voir dire process and how, the jury selection process in a very interesting way that I really hadn't seen before. Now, even in 12 Angry Men, it doesn't really show that. The element of surprise in this movie is really interesting because, this movie in a way could have kept the revelation about Nicholas Hoult's involvement in the case until the end of it. But I like that it comes out really early. So you're put in the moral sort of place of that character. The Toni Collette character is interesting too. And it does sort of explain why the defense in this trial is so bad. And frankly, for a while I was thinking it was almost a flaw of the movie that the jurors would be that convinced that this guy is guilty. I'm like, there's zero DNA evidence. I mean, are these people really just not?
That's where I was at too.
But when you watch the movie a little bit more, it starts making a little bit more sense. And it kind of has to be that way in order to lift up the tension of the story, to make it a little bit more interesting. That not only does Nicholas Hoult have a side to him that wants to get the case out of the way, but everybody wants the case to be over with, whether it's Toni Collette hoping for re-election, whether it's the defense attorney kind of doing his thing, or whether it's all the jurors who just want to go home. I also like this movie a lot because there are some unmistakable overlaps with Breaking Bad. I mean, you've got a protagonist here who is complicit in he has a way of having power over catching himself, right? Whether to make the justice system elude him or catch him. You get a Mike Ehrmantraut, former detective, played by J.K. Simmons, who's in this movie. He drives a very very specific flower truck. That was a nice little Clint touch. Clint has some heavy-handed touches here and there, like when Toni Collette goes to the frat house. Yes, that's a very much a frat house, okay? Or the part of the movie where there was one other I wrote down, but I can't find it. Well, there's a few parts that are a little too on the nose. I get it. But I was thrilled by this movie. I thought it was terrific. Very exciting, very interesting, complex. You watch that scene at the end of the movie without spoiling about where it goes, and that scene of Zoey Deutch and Nicholas Hoult talking to their kid about what their kid is going to inherit from Nicholas Hoult. That's one of the best last scenes of any Clint movie. I mean, that is a phenomenal way to end that movie that really makes you think. And then it's not even the last shot that I'm talking about. I just like that conversation. I think this is actually a pretty realistic depiction too of it's kind of an unusual, because I watched it back to back with Night Bitch. And they're both movies about having kids and the process and how that changes you as a person. I think they're in kind of interesting conversation with one another. So yeah, shame on Warner Brothers for not releasing this movie, but I'm glad it has some fan support out there. Maybe it would have been interesting to add in. I thought the movie was going to be like a Laura Linney sort of soliloquy at the end of the movie by Zoey Deutch. I thought that her character was going to kind of turn into a Lady Macbeth type, and there's some elements of that in the movie, but I don't know. It goes in interesting directions. I'm at a high 3.5 stars. I was not expecting to like this movie this much. It might make my top 10. It's fantastic, and I like the bigger issues that it dwells upon, especially the idea of, do you act for your individual self-interest or do you act for the larger interests of the community and society? And I think that's something that Clint has touched on in a lot of movies, and this one I think absolutely nails it. So I was kind of riveted from start to finish. Very, very solid film.
Yeah, I might end up at 3.5 as well. I was teetering right on the side, and like I said, the flimsiness of the case, I was like, and yet the certainty that the jury wants to act in, I was like, it doesn't make any sense. But yeah.
Although the one guy, the guy from 40-Year-Old Virgin, he even explained himself. Like he's like that guy has done wrong by the people that I know, and he's going down. It's like people are defiant for their own reasons, and I'm sure everybody had those reasons.
Never put that together, but yes, he totally is from 40-Year-Old Virgin. Well done, Todd. Well done.
Yeah. I like that this movie is also. Oh, it also touches on. It's about a character who's an alcoholic. I like that. I like that this is also a movie that asks the question, can people change? There's actually a scene where the characters talk about, are people capable? I mean, how rare is that in a movie today? You know, and it's a good scene. It's a good conversation. I think this movie has some pretty lofty ideas in it, and it really wants, and that's, I think, what the heart of the justice system is about too. I also think this movie skewers a little left wing, which I also kind of like too. And Clint's career has always sort of been, you know, here or there politically, but I wouldn't necessarily call this a political movie, but I think it's about the importance of the justice system and the importance of the jury selection system and the criminal defense process that we go through in this country. So I think it's a unique look at the legal system. It does it in a way that is not flashy, but is utterly watchable and gripping. So you don't even have to like those Grisham movies. I think anybody nowadays who watches, you know, Netflix crime dramas would love this movie. And in some ways, Max is a perfect destination for it to be released.
You put someone who's not giving quite as
do you
subtle
think
of
this is
a
better than
performance.
Letters from Iwo Jima?
Yes, I do. I also think it's better than Gran Torino and American Sniper.
Letters, I think, is kind of a masterpiece. But no, I think going along with what you were saying, you put someone who's not quite as subtle and understated as Nicholas Hoult is in this at the heart of the movie, and it doesn't work as well. Like how many performances have we talked about from him this year that are so just like he knows the part, right? He knows what his role is in this movie, and he nails it. Whether it's The Order or it's what was the other one that he had? I was just looking at it. What's the other one? Nosferatu. Yeah.
Nosferatu.
Yeah, and I mean he just gets what he's supposed to be doing, and enhances every movie he's in, and he's been in 3 great ones this year, and has shown that. And next year he's going to be Lex Luthor, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, the other scene that I was talking that I wanted to mention that was too corny was I don't know about you guys, but if I looked up Terry Plucknett plus wife, would I find a picture of your wife online, Terry? I'm not sure. that element did not work, but you needed to get to that place. So I get it. Little clunky stuff like that is honestly the only reason this shit isn't 4 stars for me. Get a more streamlined version of that, and you got a 4-star movie. Right?
First time screenwriter. So.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that was one where my wife saw that too and went, "That's not how the internet works."
No, maybe for a 94-year-old, that might be how they think it works. But
yeah, I mean, we all saw Thelma. That's how she thinks it works too.
Exactly. All right. Well, it is thrice approved. It's been a while since we've had a thrice approved movie. It's actually quad approved. Adam did give this 3 stars as well.
Complete Unknown is thrice approved.
What?
A Complete Unknown thrice approved.
Oh, that's true. But we're all talking about it at the same time. So, yeah, thrice approved, quad approved. It is on Max. It's a fun movie. Like at the least, it is engaging. So everyone should check it out. Juror number 2.
Tight 2 hours.